Blood soaked Emma Ashcroft's once white cotton dress as she stumbled through the dark Arizona desert, the moonlight her only guide as she fled from the shadow of her past. Each step sent pain searing through her battered body, but the fear of what lay behind drove her forward through the unforgiving terrain of the territory. The year was 1885, and for the first time in 3 years of marriage, Emma had found the courage to run. She had waited until Franklin was deep in his whiskey-induced slumber before slipping out the back door of their isolated ranch house. The bruises on her face were still fresh, the cut above her eye crusted with blood, and her ribs ached with every labored breath. This beating had been worse than the others. She had seen death in his eyes tonight, and she knew if she stayed until morning, she'd be buried in an unmarked grave by sundown. The distant lights of Casa Grande shimmered like a mirage in the Arizona heat. Emma had heard whispers about the Southern Pacific Railroad that ran through the town, offering passage to anywhere that wasn't here. With nothing but the clothes on her back and a small pouch containing her mother's wedding ring and the meager savings she'd secretly squirreled away over months, Emma pushed toward salvation, one painful step at a time. Dawn was breaking when she reached the outskirts of town, her legs finally giving way near a small creek. She collapsed by the water, cupping her hands to drink greedily while trying to wash away the evidence of her husband's rage from her face. The cool water stung her cuts but offered blessed relief from the desert heat that was already beginning to rise with the sun. "Madam, you all right there?" The deep voice startled her, and Emma scrambled backward, instinctively raising her arms to shield herself from another blow. "Easy now," the voice softened. "I ain't gonna hurt you." Through swollen eyes, she looked up to see a tall figure silhouetted against the rising sun. As he stepped closer, she could make out the features of a man perhaps 30 years of age, his face weathered by sun and wind, but his blue eyes kind beneath the brim of a dusty brown Stetson. He wore the practical attire of a working cowboy, faded denim, a cotton shirt with the sleeves rolled to the elbows, and well-worn boots with spurs that clinked softly as he crouched down to her level, keeping a respectful distance. "Name's Lucas Porter," he said, his voice steady and calm. "I run cattle on the Double P Ranch just north of town." He gestured to a leather canteen at his hip. "Got some clean water here if you'd prefer it to creek water." Emma remained silent, years of Franklin's control making her wary of any man's kindness. Lucas Porter studied her with concern etched across his features. "Those are some nasty wounds you got there, madam. Town doctor's a good man. I could take you to him, no questions asked." "No," Emma whispered, finding her voice at last. "No doctor, I need to catch the train." She tried to stand but swayed unsteadily. Lucas reached out but stopped short of touching her. "Train doesn't come through till tomorrow morning," he said. "You got somewhere safe to wait." Emma felt the world tilting around her. The exhaustion from her nighttime trek, the injuries, and the terrible fear that Franklin would find her before she could escape it all crashed down upon her at once. "He'll find me," she whispered, more to herself than to the stranger. Lucas Porter's jaw tightened as understanding dawned in his eyes. He'd seen this before, women escaping the very men who had sworn to love and protect them. "Madam, I've got a proposition for you. My sister-in-law runs a boarding house in town. She's good people, and no man enters those doors without her say-so. You could rest there, get cleaned up, and be on that train come morning." "I can't pay much," Emma admitted, clutching her small pouch tightly. "Wasn't asking for payment," Lucas replied. His horse, a handsome chestnut gelding, grazed nearby. "Can you ride? It's not far, but in your condition, walking might not be best." Emma hesitated. Every instinct screamed caution, but something in the cowboy's direct gaze reassured her. He had kept his distance, made no move to grab her, and spoke to her with a respect she'd nearly forgotten existed between men and women. "Yes," she finally answered. "I can ride." Lucas nodded, whistling softly to call his horse. "This is Rusty," he said as the animal trotted over. "He's gentle as they come." He laced his fingers together to create a stirrup for her. "I'll walk alongside." After a moment's hesitation, Emma placed her hand on Lucas's shoulder and her foot in his hands, allowing him to boost her up onto the saddle. The movement sent fresh pain through her ribs, and she couldn't suppress a gasp. Lucas's frown deepened, but he said nothing as he took Rusty's reins and began leading them toward town. They walked in silence for a while, Emma fighting to stay upright in the saddle. "You got a name, madam?" Lucas finally asked, his eyes fixed ahead. "Emma," she replied after a moment. "Emma Ashcroft." "Well, Miss Emma, you're safe now. Casa Grande ain't big, but we look after our own here. I'm not one of your own," she said quietly. "You are now," he answered simply. The boarding house sat on the edge of town. A two-story wooden structure painted a cheerful yellow with white trim. A sign above the porch read, "Montgomery Boarding House, clean rooms, good food." As they approached, a woman with graying hair pulled back in a severe bun stepped onto the porch, wiping her hands on an apron. "Lucas Porter, what trouble you bringing to my doorstep this time?" she called, but her tone was warm despite the words. "Morning, Mrs. Montgomery," Lucas replied, helping Emma down from the horse. "Got a lady here who needs a room and some tending to. Train doesn't come till morning." Mrs. Montgomery's eyes narrowed as she took in Emma's condition, but she asked no questions. "Bring her in," she said simply, holding the door open. Inside, the boarding house was clean and modestly furnished. The smell of baking bread and coffee filled the air. Mrs. Montgomery led them to a small parlor off the main hallway. "Sit her there," she instructed Lucas, pointing to a comfortable-looking armchair. "I'll fetch some hot water and my medicine box." She disappeared through another door, and Emma heard her barking orders to someone in the kitchen. "Hannah Montgomery's a widow," Lucas explained, standing awkwardly by the door. "Lost her husband in the Apache conflicts back in '76. Runs this place with an iron fist, but she's got a good heart." "Why are you helping me?" Emma asked, the question that had been burning in her mind since their encounter at the creek. Lucas removed his hat, running a hand through his sun-bleached brown hair. "Because it's the right thing to do," he said simply. Then, after a pause, "and because I've seen what men like that can do, my sister." He trailed off, his expression darkening. "Let's just say I couldn't help her in time," before Emma could respond, Mrs. Montgomery returned carrying a basin of steaming water, clean cloths draped over her arm, and a wooden box. "You can go now, Lucas," she said firmly. "This young woman needs privacy." Lucas nodded, placing his hat back on his head. "I'll check back this evening," he said, his eyes meeting Emma's. "Rest easy, Miss Ashcroft." After he left, Mrs. Montgomery set about cleaning Emma's wounds with gentle efficiency, asking no questions about how she came by them. She provided a clean nightgown and helped Emma bathe, wincing at the older bruises that mapped her body alongside the fresh ones. "The room at the top of the stairs is yours," she said when they had finished. "No one will disturb you there. Sleep now and we'll talk more later." Exhaustion pulled Emma toward oblivion as soon as her head touched the pillow in the small, clean room. For the first time in years, she slept without fear. When she awoke, shadows stretched long across the wooden floor. For a disorienting moment, panic seized her. How long had she slept? Was Franklin already searching for her? A soft knock at the door made her start. "Miss Ashcroft, Mrs. Montgomery's voice called. "Are you awake? There's supper if you're feeling up to it." Emma's stomach growled in response. She couldn't remember the last time she'd eaten. "Yes," she replied, her voice hoarse. "I'll be right down." She found a simple blue dress laid out at the foot of the bed, slightly too large but clean and whole. After dressing, she made her way downstairs to find Mrs. Montgomery in the dining room, setting a plate at an otherwise empty table. "The other boarders have finished," she explained. "Thought you might prefer some quiet." Emma nodded gratefully, taking a seat before the steaming plate of stew and biscuits. "Thank you for your kindness," she said softly. Mrs. Montgomery poured her a cup of coffee. "Lucas came by earlier," she said. "Wanted to make sure you were resting comfortable. He's got business in town tomorrow morning, said he'd escort you to the train if you wished." Emma looked up, surprised by the offer. "That's very kind of him." "Lucas Porter is a good man," Mrs. Montgomery said firmly, "not like some." As Emma ate, the older woman sat across from her, her shrewd eyes taking in Emma's every movement. "You're running from a husband," she stated rather than asked. Emma froze, her spoon halfway to her mouth. "Don't worry, child, your business is your own." But if you're thinking of taking that train tomorrow, you should know that men like that they don't give up easy, especially not when they think they own something." "What are you saying?" Emma asked, setting down her spoon. "I'm saying that Casa Grande might be a good place to disappear for a while. Train records can be traced. A woman traveling alone draws attention." Emma felt the fragile hope she'd been nurturing crumble. "I have to get away," she whispered. "And you will," Mrs. Montgomery assured her. "But maybe not tomorrow, and maybe not by train." She reached across the table to pat Emma's hand. "Sleep on it. We'll talk more in the morning." That night, Emma lay awake despite her exhaustion, the older woman's words echoing in her mind. Franklin had connections, his family had money and influence throughout the territory. If he wanted to find her, a simple telegram to the next station might be all it took. Dawn found her still awake, staring at the ceiling. A soft knock at the door announced Mrs. Montgomery with a tray of breakfast. "You have a visitor downstairs," she said, setting the tray on a small table. "Lucas Porter's here with some news you might want to hear." Emma dressed quickly and descended the stairs to find Lucas pacing the parlor, his hat in his hands. He looked up as she entered, his expression grim. "Miss Ashcroft," he said, nodding. "Hope you're feeling better today." "I am, thank you," she replied, noticing the tension in his shoulders. "Mrs. Montgomery said you had news." Lucas ran a hand through his hair, a gesture she was beginning to recognize as a sign of his discomfort. "There's a man in town asking questions," he said. "Tall fella, well-dressed, with a nasty scar along his jaw. Came in on horseback late last night, been showing your photograph around this morning." Emma's knees weakened, and she sank into the nearest chair. "Franklin," she whispered. "That your husband?" Lucas asked, his voice hardening. She nodded, unable to speak past the fear constricting her throat. "Well, he hasn't come here yet, but it won't take him long to find this place. Casa Grande ain't that big." "I have to leave," Emma said, standing abruptly. "The train, he's already got men watching the station," Lucas interrupted. First place he checked, Emma felt the walls closing in. There was nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. Franklin would find her, and this time he would kill her for certain. "Miss Ashcroft, Emma," Lucas said, stepping closer but still maintaining a respectful distance. "I've got a proposition for you. My ranch is about 15 miles north of here. It's isolated, hard to find if you don't know where you're looking. You could stay there while we figure out a more permanent solution." Emma echoed. "I ain't about to leave you to face that monster alone," Lucas said firmly. "No one deserves what he's done to you." Emma studied his face, searching for deceit but finding only sincere concern. "Why would you risk yourself for a stranger?" Lucas's expression darkened. "Because I've seen what men like your husband can do. My sister married a man who beat her senseless for 3 years before he finally went too far, by the time I found her." He trailed off, his jaw clenching. "I was too late for Abigail, but I'm not too late for you." The raw pain in his voice convinced Emma more than his words. This was a man who understood the gravity of her situation, who had seen firsthand the evil that men like Franklin could inflict. "How would we get there?" she asked. "If he's watching the town, there's a back way out through Mrs. Montgomery's garden," Lucas explained. "Leads to an alley that connects with the livery stable. I've got horses ready. We can be gone before he knows to look for you here." Emma looked to Mrs. Montgomery, who had been listening silently from the doorway. The older woman nodded encouragingly. "Lucas Porter's word is gold in these parts," she said. "If he says he'll keep you safe, then you'll be safe." Emma took a deep breath, wincing at the pain in her ribs. "When do we leave?" "Now," Lucas said grimly. "The longer we wait, the more likely he finds you." Within minutes, Emma had gathered her meager possessions. Mrs. Montgomery pressed a package of food and a canteen into her hands, along with a wide-brimmed hat to shield her face. "Go with God, child," the older woman said, embracing her gently. "And remember, you're stronger than you know." Lucas led Emma through the kitchen and out a back door that opened onto a small vegetable garden. Beyond the garden, a narrow alley wound between buildings toward the edge of town. They moved quickly but cautiously, Lucas checking each intersection before motioning for Emma to follow. At the livery stable, a young boy no more than 15 held the reins of 2 horses, Lucas's chestnut gelding and a smaller, dappled gray mare. All saddled and ready, Mr. Porter, the boy said, his eyes widening slightly as he took in Emma's bruised face. No one's come asking after these horses. Lucas slipped the boy a coin. Thanks, Tommy, you never saw us today, understand, the boy nodded solemnly. Yes, sir. Good luck to you, madam, he added, tipping his hat to Emma. Lucas helped Emma mount the gray mare, making sure she was steady before swinging up onto his own horse. Stay close, he instructed, and if I tell you to run, you ride hard and don't look back. They set off at a steady pace, keeping to back roads and cattle trails, avoiding the main thoroughfare through town. Emma's heart hammered in her chest with every step their horses took, expecting to hear Franklin's voice calling her name or the sound of pursuit at any moment. But they reached the outskirts of Casa Grande without incident, and Lucas led them into the open desert, angling north toward distant mountains. The sun climbed higher in the sky, beating down mercilessly. Emma's injuries throbbed with each motion of the horse, but she bit her lip and endured, freedom more important than comfort. They rode in silence for nearly an hour before Lucas finally slowed his pace, allowing their horses to walk side by side. You holding up all right? He asked, concern etching his features as he took in her pallor. I'll manage, Emma replied, straightening her posture despite the pain. We'll rest at Coyote Springs up ahead, Lucas said, gesturing toward a cluster of cottonwood trees in the distance. Water the horses, take a break from this heat. When they reached the springs, Lucas helped Emma dismount, his strong hands gentle on her waist. The small oasis provided welcome shade, and Emma sank gratefully onto a flat rock while Lucas tended to the horses. How far to your ranch? She asked as he handed her the canteen. Another 10 miles or so, he replied, crouching nearby. We should reach it by late afternoon if we keep a steady pace. He studied her face for a moment. Your husband, has he always been cruel? Emma looked down at her hands, remembering the early days of her marriage. No, she said softly. Franklin was charming when we first met. My father had just died and the bank was foreclosing on our farm. Franklin offered security, a future. She traced a finger along a scar on her wrist. The violence started after the wedding. A push at first, then a slap. It escalated slowly. Lucas's jaw tightened. Men like that don't change. They just get better at hiding their true nature until it's too late. Did your sister try to leave? Emma asked hesitantly. Pain flashed across Lucas's face. Many times. The last time her husband tracked her to our parents' home, he shot our father when he tried to intervene, then dragged Abigail back by her hair. He picked up a small stone, turning it over in his fingers. 6 months later, we found her hanging from a beam in their barn. Her husband claimed she took her own life out of shame for being a disobedient wife. I'm so sorry, Emma whispered. I knew it wasn't true, Lucas continued, his voice hardening. Abigail wasn't the type to give up, no matter how bad things got. I confronted him, demanded the truth. He laughed in my face, said no jury would convict him on the word of her grieving brother. What happened to him? Emma asked. Lucas's eyes met hers, cold and unreadable. He had an unfortunate accident while breaking a horse 2 weeks later. Neck snapped clean. He tossed the stone into the water. No one asked too many questions. A chill ran through Emma despite the desert heat. This man had killed for his sister. The realization should have frightened her, but instead she felt an odd sense of security. Lucas Porter was dangerous, yes, but not to her. We should move on, he said, standing abruptly. Best not to linger too long in one place. They rode through the afternoon, the landscape gradually changing from flat desert to rolling hills dotted with mesquite and palo verde trees. Emma's body ached with fatigue, but she forced herself to remain alert, scanning the horizon periodically for signs of pursuit. There it is, Lucas said finally, pointing to a cluster of buildings nestled against the foothills of a small mountain range. Double P Ranch. The ranch was modest but well-maintained, a main house built of adobe and timber, a large barn, several corrals, and a bunkhouse set a short distance away. As they approached, Emma saw cattle grazing in the distance and a small garden plot beside the main house. A middle-aged Mexican man emerged from the barn as they rode in, wiping his hands on a rag. Boss, wasn't expecting you back till tomorrow. His eyes shifted to Emma, taking in her bruised face with a quick glance before looking questioningly at Lucas. "Miguel, this is Miss Emma Ashcroft," Lucas said as he dismounted. "She'll be staying with us for a while." He helped Emma down from her horse, steadying her when she swayed slightly on her feet. "Miss Ashcroft, this is Miguel Vasquez, my foreman and the best cattleman in the Arizona Territory." Miguel tipped his hat respectfully. "Señorita, welcome to Double P Ranch." "Miguel, I need you to send one of the boys into town tomorrow," Lucas said, his voice low. "Have him keep an ear out for any strangers asking questions. Don't approach them directly, just gather information." The foreman nodded, understanding dawning in his eyes. "She, boss, I'll send Diego. He's smart, knows how to listen without drawing attention." He glanced at Emma again. "The missus is inside. She'll get the señorita settled." Lucas led Emma to the main house, where they were met by a plump, smiling woman with silver-streaked black hair and kind eyes. "Miguel's wife, Rosa," Lucas explained. "Best cook in 3 counties and the real boss of this ranch, though don't tell Miguel I said so." Rosa clucked disapprovingly when she saw Emma's condition, ushering her inside and speaking rapidly in a mixture of Spanish and English. "Pobrecita. What animal did this to you? Come, you need food, rest, a hot bath." She shot Lucas a meaningful look. "I'll take care of her now. Go speak with Miguel about the arrangements." Lucas hesitated, his eyes meeting Emma's. "You'll be safe here," he assured her. "Rosa will see to your needs, and I'll be close by if you need anything." After he left, Rosa led Emma to a small but comfortable bedroom off the main hallway. "The boss's sister used to stay here when she visited," she explained, her expression softening with old sadness. "He keeps it ready, though no one has used it in years." The room was simply furnished with a narrow bed, a dresser, a washstand, and a rocking chair by the window. A colorful quilt brightened the bed, and fresh wildflowers stood in a jar on the dresser. "I'll prepare a bath for you," Rosa said. "Then food and rest. Tomorrow is soon enough to worry about what comes next." The hot bath was blissful agony on Emma's battered body, the heat soothing her aching muscles while stinging her cuts and bruises. Rosa had added some kind of herbal mixture to the water that smelled of sage and lavender, and she gently washed Emma's hair, tutting softly at the bruises that circled her neck. "My mother was married to a man like yours," she said as she worked. "He broke her spirit, piece by piece, until there was nothing left. When he finally killed her, it was almost a mercy." She wrung out Emma's hair with gentle hands. "But you have fire still. I can see it in your eyes." After the bath, Rosa dressed Emma's wounds with a poultice and helped her into a clean nightgown before bringing her a tray of bean stew, fresh tortillas, and a cup of strong, sweet coffee. Emma ate ravenously, realizing how long it had been since she'd had a proper meal. As darkness fell, exhaustion overcame her, and she sank gratefully onto the bed. Through the open window, she could hear the nighttime sounds of the ranch cattle lowing softly in the distance, the gentle murmur of men's voices from the bunkhouse, the chirping of desert insects. It was peaceful in a way her life hadn't been for years, and despite the uncertainty of her situation, Emma felt herself drifting toward sleep without the knot of fear that usually accompanied nightfall. Her last conscious thought was of Lucas Porter's steady blue gaze and the promise in his voice when he said she would be safe. Emma awoke to sunlight streaming through the window and the smell of coffee and frying bacon. For a disorienting moment, she didn't recognize her surroundings, panic rising in her throat before memory returned the escape, the long ride, Lucas Porter's ranch. A soft knock at the door preceded Rosa's entrance with a tray of breakfast. "Buenos dias, señorita. Did you sleep well?" "Better than I have in years," Emma admitted, sitting up carefully, mindful of her ribs. Good, Rosa said, setting the tray across Emma's lap. "Eat, and then we will see about finding you some proper clothes. You are smaller than the boss's sister was, but I can take in seams." As Emma ate, Rosa chattered about the ranch, how Lucas had built it from nothing after returning from the war, how he was fair to his men and respected throughout the territory, how he had never married despite being the most eligible bachelor for 50 miles. "The boss is out checking the north pasture with Miguel," Rosa said as she gathered clean linens from a chest. "But he left word that you are to consider this your home for as long as you need it." She paused, her expression growing serious. He also said to tell you that your husband came to the boarding house last night looking for you. Emma's hand froze halfway to her mouth, a piece of bacon suspended in the air. Did he? Mrs. Montgomery told him she had never seen or heard of you, Rosa continued, but he did not believe her. He searched the house, broke some things. The sheriff came and made him leave, but she shook her head grimly. Lucas says this man is asking all over town, offering rewards for information. Fear clutched at Emma's heart. Franklin would not give up easily. His pride alone wouldn't allow it. No woman left Franklin Ashcroft, especially not to run off with another man, as he would surely believe she had done. What will happen now? She asked softly. Rosa's expression softened. Now you heal, you get strong again, and Lucas, he will handle the rest. The next few days passed in a strange, peaceful rhythm. Emma's body began to heal, the swelling in her face receding, the worst of the bruises fading from angry purple to dull yellow-green. Rosa found her clothing that fit well enough: simple skirts and blouses, a serviceable pair of boots, even a pretty blue shawl for the cooler desert evenings. Lucas was often absent during the days, riding out with his men to tend to ranch business. But he took his meals at the house, and in the evenings he would sit with Emma on the porch, watching the sunset and telling her stories about the land and its history. She learned that he had fought for the Union in the final year of the Civil War, barely more than a boy. That afterward, he had drifted west, working cattle drives and saving his money until he could buy this land. That he employed not only Mexicans, but also Apache men who had left the reservation, paying them fairly and treating them with respect despite the prejudices of the territory. In turn, she told him about growing up on a small farm in Kansas, about her mother's death from fever when she was 12, about her father's struggle to keep the farm going as drought and falling prices took their toll. She spoke of meeting Franklin Ashcroft, the handsome, well-spoken banker who had offered a way out of poverty and hardship, of how the mask had slipped, bit by bit, until she found herself trapped in a nightmare of violence and control. The worst part, she confessed one evening, staring into the darkening desert, was how he would be so tender afterward, how he would weep and beg forgiveness, promise it would never happen again, and I would believe him over and over until I couldn't anymore. Lucas listened silently, his hands clasped between his knees, his expression unreadable in the fading light. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment before speaking. My pa used to say that the true measure of a man is how he treats those who have no power over him, he said finally. By that measure, your husband is no man at all. On the 5th day, Diego, the young ranch hand who had been sent to town, returned with troubling news. Franklin Ashcroft was still in Casa Grande, had taken a room at the hotel, and had hired several rough-looking men to help search for his runaway wife. He had even approached the sheriff with a story about Emma being mentally unstable, claiming she had attacked him before fleeing and needed to be found for her own protection. Sheriff didn't seem entirely convinced, Diego reported as they gathered in the kitchen. But the man is offering $100 to anyone who brings information about her whereabouts. That's a lot of money in these parts. Lucas's expression hardened. Money talks, especially in a place where most folks are just scraping by. He turned to Emma. You should stay close to the ranch house for now. No riding out, even with an escort. Emma nodded, feeling the walls closing in again. She had begun to hope that Franklin might give up, might conclude she had taken the train after all and was now states away. The realization that he was still hunting her, that his reach extended even to this remote place, sent cold fear washing through her veins. That night, unable to sleep, Emma slipped out onto the porch, wrapped in her shawl against the desert chill. The moon hung low and full, bathing the landscape in silver light. She leaned against the porch rail, breathing in the scent of dust and sage, trying to calm the frantic beating of her heart. Can't sleep. Lucas's voice came from the shadows, startling her. He stepped into the moonlight, a steaming cup in each hand. Rosa's remedy, he explained, offering one to her. Chamomile with a touch of whiskey, works wonders for restless nights. Emma accepted the cup gratefully, the warmth seeping into her cold fingers. I was thinking about Franklin, she admitted. About what happens next. Lucas settled beside her, leaving a respectful distance between them. What do you want to happen next? The question caught her off guard. For so long, her wants had been irrelevant, only survival had mattered. I want to be free of him, she said finally. I want to not be afraid anymore. And after that, Lucas pressed gently, if you could have any life you wanted, what would it be? Emma stared out at the moonlit landscape, considering. I don't know, she confessed. For 3 years, I've only thought as far as the next day, the next hour sometimes. The future was. It was a luxury I couldn't afford. Lucas nodded, understanding in his eyes. When Abigail died, I couldn't see past my grief and rage. The future was just a blank. But slowly, I built one day by day. He gestured toward the sprawling ranch. Whatever you decide, whatever future you want to build, I'll help you get there. Why? Emma asked, turning to face him fully. Why risk so much for someone you barely know? Lucas was silent for a moment, his profile strong in the moonlight. Because when I look at you, he said finally, I see someone worth fighting for. The simple sincerity in his voice made something warm unfurl in Emma's chest, a feeling so foreign she almost didn't recognize it. Hope. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to imagine a future one without fear, without pain, without looking over her shoulder for the next blow. Thank you, she whispered, and they stood together in companionable silence, watching the moon's slow arc across the star-scattered sky. The peace was shattered 3 days later when Miguel came riding hard into the yard, his horse lathered with sweat. Emma was helping Rosa hang laundry when he arrived, calling urgently for Lucas. Riders coming, Miguel reported grimly when Lucas emerged from the barn. 5 men heavily armed. One matches the description of the señorita's husband. There may be 30 minutes behind me. Emma felt the blood drain from her face, the wet sheet she was holding slipping from nerveless fingers. Lucas's expression hardened as he turned to her. Emma, go inside with Rosa. Pack only what you need, we may have to leave quickly. To Miguel, he said, get the men ready. No one starts anything, but I want a show of force, and send someone to bring in the herd from the south pasture. I don't want our cattle scattered if this turns ugly. As Rosa hurried her inside, Emma caught a glimpse of the ranch hands gathering, several checking rifles and shotguns. The sight sent a chill through her. Men might die today because of her. Lucas, she called, pulling away from Rosa. This is my fight. I can't let you and your people risk yourselves. Lucas strode over, his face set in determined lines. This became my fight the moment I found you by that creek, he said firmly. Now go with Rosa, please. Inside, Emma's hands shook as she gathered her few belongings into a small carpet bag Rosa provided. I should leave, she said desperately. Draw them away from here. Rosa shook her head firmly. And go where? No, Nina, the boss will handle this. He knows what he is doing. She pressed a small knife into Emma's hand. But keep this, just in case. A woman should always have protection. They waited in tense silence, listening to the preparations outside. Emma paced the small bedroom, her mind racing. Franklin had found her. Somehow he had tracked her here, and now he was coming with armed men. The familiar terror rose in her throat, threatening to choke her, but alongside the fear, a new emotion kindled anger. Anger at Franklin for all he had taken from her, for the years of pain and fear, for his refusal to let her go even now. Anger at herself for allowing it for so long, and with the anger came resolve. She would not be a victim again. Whatever happened today, she would face it standing on her own 2 feet. The sound of approaching horses broke through her thoughts. From the window, she could see Lucas and his men arranged in a loose semicircle before the house, a clear message to the approaching riders. Lucas stood slightly ahead of the others, his stance relaxed but alert, one hand resting casually near his holstered revolver. 5 riders came into view, slowing as they approached the gathered ranchers. At their head rode a tall man in an expensive suit, his blonde hair gleaming in the sunlight, a distinctive scar running along his jawline. Franklin Ashcroft. Emma's breath caught in her throat at the sight of him. Even at this distance, she could see the cold fury in his posture, the rigid set of his shoulders. The men flanking him were clearly hired guns, rough-looking characters with the hard eyes of men who killed for pay. Stay here, she told Rosa firmly, moving toward the door. Senorita, no. Rosa tried to catch her arm, but Emma evaded her grasp. I won't hide while others fight my battles, she said. Not anymore. She stepped onto the porch just as Franklin's group reined to a halt before Lucas. The tension in the yard was palpable, like the air before a lightning strike. I'm looking for Lucas Porter, Franklin called, his cultured voice carrying clearly. You found him, Lucas replied evenly. This is private property, mister. State your business. Franklin's gaze swept over the assembled ranchers, contempt evident in his expression. My name is Franklin Ashcroft. I'm looking for my wife, who was abducted from Casa Grande several days ago. I have reason to believe she's being held here against her will. Nobody's being held here against their will, Lucas said, his voice hardening. And the only abduction I know about is a woman being forced to stay with a man who beat her half to death. Franklin's face darkened with rage. How dare you? Whatever tales my wife has spun, I'm right here, Franklin, Emma called, stepping forward to the edge of the porch. And they're not tales. All eyes turned to her. Franklin's expression shifted rapidly from surprise to calculated charm. Emma, darling, he said, his voice softening to the persuasive tone she knew so well. Thank God you're alive. I've been sick with worry. He dismounted, taking a step toward the house before Lucas moved to block his path. That's far enough, Lucas warned. Franklin's charm vanished, replaced by cold fury. Step aside, cowboy, that's my wife, and I'm taking her home. No, you're not, Emma said, her voice stronger than she'd expected. She descended the porch steps slowly, conscious of every eye upon her. The bruises on her face had faded but were still visible testament to Franklin's handiwork. I'm not going anywhere with you, not now, not ever. Franklin's mouth twisted into an ugly sneer. Don't be ridiculous, Emma. You're my wife. You belong with me. His gaze shifted accusingly to Lucas. What lies has this man been filling your head with? What has he promised you? The only one who ever lied was you, Emma replied, stopping beside Lucas. She felt his presence beside her like a solid wall, lending her strength. You promised to love and protect me, then nearly killed me instead. You're confused, darling, Franklin said, his voice taking on the patronizing tone he used when speaking to her in public. You know you've always had episodes, imagining things. The doctor said what you paid him to say, Emma interrupted, anger lending her courage. Just like the sheriff back home looked the other way when I came to him with bruises because your family donated to his election campaign. Franklin's face contorted with rage, the mask of concern slipping away entirely. You ungrateful whore, he spat. I gave you everything, a fine home, security, my name, and this is how you repay me. By running off with some saddle tramp, Lucas tensed beside her, but Emma laid a restraining hand on his arm. You gave me nothing but pain and fear, she said quietly, and now I'm taking back my life. Go home, Franklin, we're finished. For a moment, Franklin stood frozen, as if unable to comprehend her defiance. Then his hand moved to the pistol at his hip. You're my wife, he growled. You leave when I say you can leave. In a flash, Lucas's gun cleared its holster, aimed squarely at Franklin's chest. Around them, both groups of men raised their weapons, a standoff with death hanging in the balance. Think very carefully about your next move, Ashcroft, Lucas said, his voice deadly calm. There are 5 of you and 12 of us. Those aren't good odds. The gunmen exchanged uneasy glances, clearly recalculating the situation. One of them leaned over to mutter something to Franklin, who ignored him, his eyes fixed on Emma with murderous intensity. She's still legally my wife, he said, his voice shaking with fury. The law says assault is a crime, Lucas interrupted. So is attempted murder. How do you think a jury would view those marks on her face, or the witnesses who saw her condition when she staggered into Casa Grande? Franklin's jaw worked as he considered his options. Finally, he lowered his hand from his weapon, though the hatred in his eyes didn't diminish. This isn't over, he warned. She belongs to me and I'll see her dead before I let another man have her. No, Franklin, Emma said softly. I never belonged to you. That was your first mistake. Franklin's gaze shifted to Lucas, cold calculation replacing rage. You, he said, you turned her against me, you stole what was mine. A cruel smile twisted his features. I wonder how you'll feel when she does the same to you. When she takes everything you have and leaves you with nothing, it's what women like her do. That's enough, Lucas said, his finger tightening on the trigger. Get back on your horse and ride out. Don't stop until you're well clear of my land. And if I ever see you near Emma again, they'll be burying what's left of you in a shoebox. For a tense moment, it seemed Franklin might push his luck further. Then one of his hired guns spoke up. Mr. Ashcroft, we didn't sign on for a massacre. Maybe we should reconsider. The momentum broken, Franklin turned away with a last venomous glance at Emma. This isn't over, he repeated as he mounted his horse. Yes, it is, Lucas replied. You'll never hurt her again, and as for her name, you'll never hear it from her lips again. As Franklin and his men rode away, Lucas kept his gun trained on them until they disappeared from sight. Only then did he holster it, turning to find Emma trembling beside him, reaction setting in now that the immediate danger had passed. Are you all right? He asked gently. Emma nodded, though tears streamed down her face. He'll be back, she whispered. He won't let this go. Lucas took her hands in his blue eyes steady on hers. Maybe, he acknowledged, but we'll be ready, and you won't face him alone again, I promise you that. That night, after the excitement had died down and the ranch had returned to its normal routine, Emma sat with Lucas on the porch, a blanket wrapped around her shoulders against the evening chill. The confrontation with Franklin had left her drained but oddly liberated, as if speaking her truth aloud had broken some final chain binding her to her past. What happens now? She asked, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. Lucas leaned back in his chair, considering. That depends on you, he said finally. You're free to go wherever you want, do whatever you choose. I can arrange safe passage to California or back east if that's what you want. Emma studied his profile in the fading light, noting the strength in his jawline, the kindness around his eyes. In the short time she had known him, Lucas Porter had shown her more respect and consideration than Franklin had in 3 years of marriage. He had risked himself and his men to protect her, asked for nothing in return, and now offered her freedom without conditions. What if I want to stay? She asked quietly. Lucas turned to her, surprise evident in his expression. Here, at the ranch, Emma nodded, suddenly unsure. Unless that would be an imposition, I could earn my keep. I know how to cook, so garden, Emma, Lucas interrupted gently. You don't have to earn your right to be safe. This place can be your home for as long as you want it, no conditions attached. And what about you? She asked, gathering her courage. What do you want? Lucas was silent for a long moment, choosing his words carefully. What I want doesn't matter right now. You've just escaped one man who tried to control your life. The last thing you need is another man making demands or expectations. Emma reached out tentatively, placing her hand over his. I'm asking what you want, Lucas, not what you demand or expect. His hand turned beneath hers, their fingers intertwining naturally. I want you to heal, he said softly. I want you to find yourself again, the woman you were before Franklin Ashcroft stole your spirit. And when you have, if you still want to stay then. He paused, his eyes meeting hers in the dim light. Then I'd like the chance to court you properly, the way a woman like you deserves. Warmth bloomed in Emma's chest at his words. For the first time in years, the future seemed not a thing to dread but a path of possibility. I think I'd like that, she whispered. Lucas smiled, and in that moment, Emma knew she had found not just safety but the potential for happiness she had long thought beyond her reach. The weeks that followed took on a gentle rhythm. Emma's body healed, the visible bruises fading, though the deeper wounds, the ones that couldn't be seen, would take longer. Lucas kept his word, giving her space and time, never pushing for more than she was ready to give. She began to find her place on the ranch, helping Rosa with cooking and household tasks, learning about cattle ranching from Miguel, even trying her hand at gardening in the small plot beside the house. The work was satisfying, giving structure to days that had once been filled with dread and uncertainty. Lucas watched her transformation with quiet pleasure, noting how she stood straighter each day, how her smile came more readily, how she no longer flinched at sudden movements or raised voices. They took to riding together in the early evenings, exploring the range of the Double P, Lucas pointing out landmarks and sharing stories of the land's history. On one such ride, Nearly a month after her arrival, they stopped at a high point overlooking the ranch. The setting sun painted the desert in hues of gold and crimson, the ranch buildings tiny in the distance, cattle mere specks on the landscape. "It's beautiful," Emma said, drinking in the wild splendor of the territory. "It is," Lucas agreed, though his eyes were on her rather than the scenery. "Emma, there's something I need to tell you," she turned to him, noting the serious set of his features. "What is it?" "I sent a telegram to the sheriff in Prescott last week, inquiring about your husband," he said. "Word came back yesterday, Franklin Ashcroft is dead." Emma felt as if the ground had dropped away beneath her. "Dead," she echoed. "How?" "Shot in a gambling dispute in Tucson," Lucas explained. "Apparently he'd been drinking heavily, accused another player of cheating. Guns were drawn." He studied her face carefully. "Are you all right?" Emma wasn't sure what she felt. Not grief, certainly. Relief, yes, but mixed with a strange emptiness, as if a shadow that had loomed over her for years had suddenly vanished, leaving her blinking in unexpected sunlight. "Yes," she said finally. "I think I am. It's just strange to think he's gone, that he can never hurt me again." "You're free," Lucas said softly. "Truly free." Emma looked out over the landscape, the vast open country stretching to the horizon. Free. The word seemed too small to contain all that it meant: safety, possibility, a future of her own choosing. "There's more," Lucas continued. "The telegram mentioned that Ashcroft had no living relatives. His estate will likely go through probate, but as his widow, you stand to inherit." Emma gave a hollow laugh. "I want nothing of his," she said firmly. "Let it go to charity or the state. I've paid enough for anything with the Ashcroft name attached." Lucas nodded, understanding in his eyes. "It's your decision," he said, "but know that whatever you choose, your future is secure. You have a home here for as long as you want it." As they rode back to the ranch in companionable silence, Emma found her thoughts turning not to the past, but to the future, a future that seemed suddenly wide open with possibility. And central to those possibilities was the man riding beside her, a man who had shown her what respect and kindness truly meant. That night after dinner, Lucas found her on the porch, gazing up at the star-filled sky. He joined her at the railing, close enough that their shoulders nearly touched. "Beautiful night," he commented. "MMM," Emma agreed, breathing in the scent of sage and desert dust. "Lucas, I've been thinking about what you said earlier about being free." He turned to her, his expression attentive. "And I am free," she said slowly. "For the first time in years, maybe in my whole life, free to make my own choices, follow my own heart." She met his gaze directly. "And my heart is telling me that I don't want to wait anymore." Lucas's breath caught audibly. "Emma, are you sure?" "After everything you've been through, I'm sure," she interrupted gently. "Franklin took 3 years of my life. I won't let him take a single day more by making me afraid to reach for happiness when it's standing right in front of me." Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, Lucas raised his hand to cup her cheek. Emma leaned into his touch, her eyes closing briefly at the tenderness of the gesture. "I've never met anyone as brave as you," he murmured, his thumb tracing the curve of her cheekbone where a bruise had once bloomed. "I don't feel brave," she admitted. "Just ready to live instead of merely survive." When Lucas finally lowered his lips to hers, the kiss was gentle, questioning, free of demand or expectation. Emma found herself responding naturally, her hands coming up to rest on his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath her palms. When they parted, Lucas rested his forehead against hers, his breathing slightly uneven. "I've wanted to do that since the moment I saw you by that creek," he confessed. Emma smiled, a genuine, uncomplicated happiness warming her from within. "I'm glad you waited," she said softly. "I needed to find myself again first." They stood together under the canopy of stars, the future stretching before them full of promise. Emma knew there would still be challenges ahead, nightmares that would wake her screaming, moments when old fears would surface unexpectedly. But for the first time in years, she faced the future not with dread but with hope, her hand clasped firmly in the hand of a man who had shown her what love could truly be. The following spring brought new life to the Double P Ranch. Wildflowers carpeted the desert in a riot of color. Calves frolicked on strengthening legs beside their mothers, and in the garden beside the ranch house, Emma coaxed tender shoots from the rich soil. She knelt in the soft earth, transplanting tomato seedlings when a shadow fell across her work. Looking up, she shielded her eyes against the sun to see Lucas standing over her, his expression uncharacteristically nervous. "Taking a break from the branding?" she asked, sitting back on her heels. "Something like that," he replied, offering her a hand up. When she stood, he didn't release her fingers, instead running his thumb across her knuckles in a gesture that had become familiar and beloved over the months of their courtship. "Emma," he began, then stopped, seeming to gather his thoughts. "These past months have been the happiest of my life. Having you here, watching you grow stronger and more confident each day, it's been a privilege." She smiled, squeezing his hand encouragingly. "For me too," she said softly. Lucas took a deep breath, his blue eyes serious beneath the brim of his hat. "I know we agreed to take things slow, to give you time to heal and find yourself again. And if you need more time, I understand completely, but I can't go another day without asking." He reached into his pocket with his free hand, drawing out a small velvet pouch. "Emma Ashcroft, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" From the pouch, he tipped a ring into his palm, a simple gold band set with a small but perfect diamond that caught the sunlight and threw it back in rainbow fragments. Emma's breath caught in her throat. Though they had spoken of a future together, this formal step still took her by surprise. For a moment, unbidden memories of another proposal surfaced. Franklin's confident expectation of her acceptance, the ring he had chosen without consulting her tastes, the subtle ways he had already begun to control her even then. But this was different. Lucas waited patiently, his expression open, making no move to place the ring on her finger without her explicit consent. In his eyes, she saw not possession but partnership, not demand but invitation. "Yes," she whispered, tears of joy pricking her eyes. "Yes, Lucas Porter, I will marry you." His face broke into the wide, unguarded smile she had come to cherish, and he slipped the ring onto her finger with hands that trembled slightly. It fit perfectly, neither too tight nor too loose, a physical manifestation of how right this felt. "It was my mother's," he explained. "My father gave it to her when they had nothing but dreams and determination. Miguel rode all the way to Tucson to retrieve it from the bank for me." Emma looked down at the ring, imagining the history it carried, the love and partnership it represented. "It's perfect," she said sincerely. "Absolutely perfect." They were married 2 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the ranch, with Rosa and Miguel standing as witnesses and the ranch hands gathered in their Sunday best. Emma wore a dress of pale blue silk that Rosa had helped her make, her hair adorned with desert wildflowers. Lucas wore a new black suit, his weathered face solemn with emotion as they spoke their vows beneath the shade of a cottonwood tree. The celebration afterward lasted well into the night, with music from Miguel's guitar and Diego's fiddle, dancing in the yard, and a feast that showcased Rosa's finest cooking. As the evening stars appeared, Lucas led his bride away from the festivities to the newly expanded ranch house, where he had built an addition to accommodate their life together. Their first night as husband and wife was marked by tenderness and discovery, Lucas's gentle patience helping Emma overcome the last of her fears. In his arms, she found not the painful submission Franklin had demanded, but a joyful giving and receiving between equals, a physical expression of the love and trust they had built together. Later, as they lay tangled in the sheets, Emma's head resting on Lucas's chest, she marveled at the journey that had brought her here from terror and despair to safety and joy. "What are you thinking about so intently, Mrs. Porter?" Lucas murmured, his fingers tracing lazy patterns along her bare shoulder. Emma smiled at the new name, still novel but already feeling like it had always been hers. "About how close I came to never knowing this," she replied honestly, "if I hadn't found the courage to run that night. If you hadn't found me by that creek." Lucas tightened his arm around her. "But you did, and I did, and here we are," he said simply. "The past has shaped us, but it doesn't define our future. That's ours to write together." As she drifted towards sleep in the circle of his arms, Emma knew he was right. The scars of her past would always be part of her story, but they no longer dictated her path. Ahead lay a future bright with possibility, beside a man who had shown her what love truly meant: not control or possession, but respect, partnership, and the freedom to be fully herself. The years that followed brought changes to the Double P Ranch. Under Lucas and Emma's joint stewardship, the operation expanded, adding more cattle, improving the bloodlines, and acquiring additional grazing land. Emma, drawing on her childhood experience on her father's farm, established a thriving vegetable garden that supplied not only the ranch, but also brought an additional income at the growing Casa Grande market. 2 years after their wedding, their son William was born, named for Lucas's father. He arrived during a summer thunderstorm, Rosa serving as midwife while Lucas paced anxiously outside the bedroom door. When he was finally allowed in to see his wife and newborn son, the look of wonder and love on his face was something Emma knew she would carry in her heart forever. "He's perfect," Lucas whispered, gently cradling the tiny bundle, "just like his mother." Emma watched them together, her heart so full it felt like it might burst. The fear that had once accompanied thoughts of motherhood, fear born of witnessing Franklin's rages and wondering what kind of father he would be, had been replaced by a serene confidence in the family she and Lucas were building together. Little William grew into a sturdy, curious boy with his father's blue eyes and his mother's determined spirit. He was joined 3 years later by a sister, Abigail, named for Lucas's beloved sibling. From her earliest days, Abby showed a fierce independence that both delighted and occasionally exasperated her parents. Life on the ranch was not without challenges. Drought years tested their resilience. Illness sometimes swept through the cattle, and the changing economy of the territory brought new competitors and challenges. But through it all, Lucas and Emma faced each obstacle as partners, drawing strength from each other and from the love that had grown deeper with each passing year. On the 10th anniversary of the day Lucas found Emma by the creek, they rode together to the spot where they had first stopped to rest during their escape from Casa Grande. The springs still bubbled up from the rocky ground, the cottonwoods had grown taller, but the view of the desert was unchanged, vast, beautiful, and wild. They dismounted, spreading a blanket in the shade for a simple picnic. William and Abby had been left in Rosa's capable care, giving them this rare afternoon alone together. "Do you ever think about him?" Lucas asked as they sat side by side, looking out over the landscape. It was the first time in many years that either of them had alluded to Franklin, even obliquely. Emma considered the question. "Less and less," she answered truthfully. "Sometimes I dream about those days, wake up feeling like I'm still there, but then I feel you beside me and the fear fades." She turned to him, studying the face she had come to know as well as her own, the laugh lines at the corners of his eyes deeper now, strands of silver beginning to show in his brown hair. "You asked me once what I wanted for my future when I couldn't see beyond the next day." "Do you remember what I said?" Lucas smiled, taking her hand in his. "You said you wanted to be free, to not be afraid anymore. And I am," she said simply. "Because of you, because of what we've built together, I've found more than freedom, I've found joy." She leaned forward to kiss him, a gesture as natural and necessary as breathing after all these years. "Thank you for saving me." Lucas shook his head, his expression earnest. "You saved yourself, Emma. You found the courage to run, to start over, to trust again. I just had the good fortune to be there when you did." As the sun began its descent toward the western horizon, painting the desert in gold and crimson, they gathered their things and prepared to ride back to the ranch, back to their children, their home, the life they had created together. Emma mounted her horse, looking toward the distant shape of the Double P buildings. She thought of the frightened, broken woman who had stumbled into Casa Grande a decade ago, blood on her dress and desperation in her heart. That woman could never have imagined the happiness that awaited her, the strength she would find within herself, the love that would heal wounds she thought would never mend. "Ready to head home?" Lucas asked, already astride his horse. Emma smiled, feeling the weight of the simple gold ring on her finger, the symbol of promises made and kept. "Yes," she said, turning her face toward the future they continued to build together. "I'm ready." As they rode side by side toward home, Emma remembered the words Lucas had spoken to Franklin on that fateful day at the ranch. "You'll never hurt her again, and as for her name, you'll never hear it from her lips again." It had been a promise, one that Lucas had kept with unwavering dedication. Under his protection and love, the shadow of Franklin Ashcroft had faded until it was nothing more than a distant memory, a dark chapter in a story that had turned toward light. Ahead lay the ranch, their children, and all the days yet to come. Behind lay the path they had traveled together, each step bringing healing and hope. And beside her rode the man who had taught her that true love meant not possession but freedom, the freedom to become her fullest self, to build a life of her own choosing, to love deeply without fear. As Casa Grande disappeared behind them and the Double P Ranch grew larger on the horizon, Emma knew with bone-deep certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be, riding toward home, toward family, toward a future limited only by the boundaries of their dreams.